Hi, I'm Carl Azus for CNN Student News. It's good to see you this Wednesday, May 14th. We're starting today with a report from the Middle Eastern nation of Syria. It's a country that's been divided and in many places destroyed by civil war. That started 3 years ago, and the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says at least 150,000 people have been killed and that roughly a third of those people are civilians. A week ago, a truce took effect in the city of Homs. This is a strategically important city for both the Syrian government and the rebels fighting it. It's an ancient city, and it's a city that's been under siege in the conflict. The ceasefire is showing signs of falling apart, but it brought at least temporary relief to people who'd seen war at their doorstep.
The massive destruction in the old town of Homs shows the whole tragedy of Syria's civil war. But in the middle of this sad scene, some are beaming with joy. Zeynat Akhras is one of only a handful of civilians who lived through the entire 2.5-year siege of old Homs. I don't even want to think about it, she says. The last 3 months were the toughest because we could only eat grass and leaves all the time. The Syrian army sealed off Homs after it fell into rebel hands. Supplies of food and medicine quickly depleted. Zeynat's brother Ayman was trapped with her the whole time. He tried to find food and gather firewood for the little stove in their apartment. I took wood this size and bigger, he says. It's some of the wood rebels broke out of Homs to burn. I only used leftovers. When virtually all their food had run out, they were forced to eat leaves. Ayman says of all places, he found the best ones in a graveyard. He asks me to try them.
Good? It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Every day?
For breakfast, lunch, and dinner, he says. And each meal was just a tiny bowlful.
What we always have to keep in mind is that the people who were stranded here were not only starving, they were also subject to intense shelling pretty much round the clock that laid waste to large parts of the historic town of Homs.
With its use of heavy weapons and the siege of this and other districts in Homs, the Assad regime has been accused of using starvation as a weapon in the civil war. Zeynat and Ayman say their apartment was raided by opposition fighters dozens of times, and the rebels took most of their few remaining supplies. They took everything, he says: marmalade, 5 canisters of olive oil, honey, tea. They didn't leave anything. After more than 2 years of hunger, Zeynat is weak. She weighs only 34 kilos, around 68 pounds. These photos from a family celebration show her before the conflict began.
Next story takes us to the U.S. state of Texas. A wildfire started burning in the Panhandle on Sunday, and strong winds whipped it across the landscape. As of last night, the Texas A&M Forest Service said the fire was about 65% contained, but it had still destroyed more than 90 homes, dozens of other buildings, and forced the evacuations of thousands of people. Wildfires are relatively common in the U.S. On average, the country sees more than 100,000 of them a year. They burn between 4 and 5 million acres. That's like millions of football fields. And the vast majority of these fires, about 90%, are caused by people, though officials don't know yet what caused the one in Texas.
Time for the shout out. Under what flag did the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria sail? If you think you know it, shout it out. Was it the flag of Italy, Spain, Portugal, or Britain? You've got 3 seconds. Go. Because Spanish rulers financed Christopher Columbus's transatlantic voyages, his ship sailed under the Spanish flag. That's your answer, and that's your shout out.
The Santa Maria was Christopher Columbus's flagship when he first sailed the ocean blue. It never made it back to Spain. The Santa Maria was wrecked when it ran aground near Haiti on Christmas Day, 1492. So where's the wreckage? Barry Clifford, a modern-day explorer, thinks he's found it, lying in a reef about 10 to 15 feet deep off Haiti's coast. But this isn't a newly discovered shipwreck. Clifford and his team dove the site back in 2003. He says at that time, archaeologists misidentified a cannon that was part of the wreckage. After doing some research, Clifford realized that this wreck could be the big one. There's a problem though. The cannon has been looted since Clifford explored it. So in order to determine if this is the Santa Maria, archaeologists will have to excavate the wreckage. Clifford's planning a trip back to Haiti to figure out the next steps. Before Kyle White received the Medal of Honor, he said that from what he'd heard, it was heavy, that when it's put around your neck, you feel the weight of it, what it all costs. The former U.S. Army sergeant found out what that's like yesterday. It was for his heroism in November of 2007, when he was 20 years old and a long way from his home in Seattle, Washington. The platoon radio telephone operator says he's changed since then. He's left the Army, but his service earned him the nation's highest military decoration.
For radio telephone operator Kyle White and the soldiers of Chosen Company 2nd Battalion Airborne, the mission to meet with village elders in the mountains of northeastern Afghanistan had red flags from the very start. They suspected the villagers of collusion with the enemy.
A lot of us, we had that, that gut feeling right before we left. It's just something wasn't right.
More alarms. It seemed like every male of fighting age and above was at the meeting. Radio communications were coming in a language the interpreter did not understand. And then when they left, the shooting started.
One, and then 2 shots, and then the echo, and then just fully automatic fire, and rocket-propelled grenades coming in from, seemed like, everywhere.
White was knocked unconscious. When he woke up, 10 of the 14 Americans in his unit were nowhere to be found. Among those White could see was Marine Sergeant Philip Box, by now severely wounded. White repeatedly braved enemy fire to drag Box to safety. Box later died, along with 5 other Americans. The Medal of Honor is being awarded to White for what he did to try to save his comrades and get them out of there, though he says he never expected to make it home himself.
I told myself from the beginning of that ambush that I was going to be killed. Just the amount of fire, I'm not going to make it through this.
But he did, along with Specialist Kane Schilling of Iowa, who says he owes his life to White.
I was probably more excited for it than he was, just because it shows, he absolutely saved my life that day and many others.
Those who survived wear wristbands bearing the names of those who did not. White sees the Medal of Honor as a tribute to them.
To me, the heroes are those that lost their lives that day, because they gave their lives in defense of all of us and all of America.
On the Potomac River across from Washington, D.C., Arlington National Cemetery is the resting place of more than 400,000 people. It was 150 years ago that Arlington was first used as a military burial ground. An Army private who enlisted to fight in the Civil War was laid to rest there on May 13, 1864. Arlington was established as a national cemetery a month later, and today it's where you'll find the graves of presidents, astronauts, war heroes, including men and women who've served in every branch of the U.S. military. Arlington is still active. There are thousands of funerals held there every year, and there are plans to expand the site to ensure its availability for decades to come. It's Worldwide Wednesday on the CNN Student News Roll Call. What does that mean? It means we're going to places like Kaiserslautern, Germany. We're happy to be part of your day at Kaiserslautern Middle School. Next, we're traveling across the Atlantic to Canada at the St. Ambrose School. Thank you for watching in Calgary, Alberta. And now across the Pacific to Japan at the Muroran Institute of Technology. We're glad you're watching in Muroran, Hokkaido. Edna Lamping never made it to her high school prom. Her family was strict and didn't let her go. But more than 70 years later, she and her husband were the VIPs at this year's prom for Montour High School in Pennsylvania. Edna's husband, who's 1 year older at age 92, says he had the best looking girl there. And they showed everyone how to dance, or at least how they dance. I love this season. It reminds me of the proms I went to. I'm glad there are no pictures of me lying around anywhere, because that'd be pretty embarrassing, especially considering the size of my hair and the way I just hand it up for the camera. Well, that's just so you can picture it. I went to junior and senior proms, had perfect attendance. It was a chance to step up, step out, and step on my date's feet. One thing we can promise, there are always puns afoot on CNN Student News. I'm Carl Azus. Hope to see you tomorrow.